All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle something that's honestly a game changer in modern JavaScript, modules. If you've ever felt like your code needs a serious declutter, or you want to supercharge your projects and make them way more reusable, then you're in exactly the right spot. Let's dive in.
So does this sound familiar? You kick off a new project. Everything's neat and tidy, but then it grows. And before you know it, you're lost in a single 1,000-line script file, right? Variables are stepping on each other's toes, finding a simple function feels like a scavenger hunt, and the whole thing is just fragile. It's a total headache, but trust me, there's a much better way to handle this.
And here's the solution. Say hello to the ES module. This is JavaScript's own built-in way of letting you split your code into separate logical files. You can think of them like little building blocks. Each block does one thing, and it does it well. Then you just snap them together to build a really solid, stable app. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. First, why you should even bother with modules. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of sharing code with export and using it with import. After that, a really cool trick for loading code on demand. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with some history and best practices.
All right, first things first. Why go through all the trouble? What's the real payoff for taming that code chaos we were just talking about?
You know, the best way to picture this is to think of a module as a labeled toolkit. Seriously, you've got one toolkit just for user stuff. Another one has all your little helper functions. This isn't just about being tidy. It's super practical. It helps squash bugs before they even happen, because the code inside one module can't accidentally mess with another. And man, it makes your project so much easier to manage and scale up later on.
Okay, so how do we actually make these toolkits? It all kicks off with one keyword, export. This is literally how you take one of your tools, a function, a variable, whatever, and you put it on the shelf, ready for any other part of your app to grab and use. So you've got two main flavors of export, named and default. With named exports, you can stick a bunch of different tools on a shelf from one file. Like, imagine a utils.js file that exports a greet function and an API key variable. But a default export, that's like saying, hey, this file, it has one main thing it does, like exporting a user class. So remember, you can have a ton of named exports, but only ever one default per file.
So which one should you be using? Well, the general consensus, the best practice, is to stick with named exports. And there are two really good reasons why. First, they're just clearer. When you go to import it, you have to use its exact name, so there's no confusion about what you're grabbing. And second, performance. This is a big one. Modern tools can do something called tree shaking with named exports. It's like they look at your code, see which exports you never actually used, and just shake them off the tree. They get removed, which makes your final app smaller and way faster. Okay, we've put our tools on the shelf using export, so now let's go grab them. And to do that, we use the import statement. And the whole process is just beautifully simple. Check it out. Over in one file, let's call it utils.js, you export a function. Then, in your main file, index.js, you write an import statement to go get that function, and boom, just like that, the function is there in index.js, ready for you to use. It creates this really clean, really obvious link between your files. And what's cool is you have a lot of options for how you import. You can grab a named export using those curly braces. For a default export, you don't need them. What if you already have a variable with the same name? No problem. You can rename it right in the import using the as keyword. Or if you're feeling greedy and want everything from a module, you can just use import star as to slurp it all up into one handy object. Okay, let's talk about a real performance power-up. This is kind of next level. Everything we've looked at so far, it all loads the second your app starts. But what about code for a feature the user might not even use, like an export to PDF function? Why load that for everyone? This is where dynamic imports become your secret weapon.
See, those normal import statements at the top of your file, they're static. They grab and process everything up front before the user sees anything. But dynamic import, which looks and acts like a function, lets you put that off. You can literally wait for a user to click a button and only then go and fetch the module you need. This is a huge, huge win for making your app feel snappy right from the start.
So how does this magic actually work under the hood? Well, the key thing to understand is that when you call import, it doesn't just give you the code right away. Instead, it gives you back a promise. And if you've worked with async.js, you know a promise is just a placeholder for something that will finish later. This is perfect. It means we can use our favorite async and await syntax to pause and wait for the module to arrive before we try to use it. And here's what that looks like in real code. We've got a click listener on a button. The first thing you'll notice is the function is marked async. Now inside, we await the import call. Our code literally pauses on this line. It waits for the network request to finish and for the module to be ready. Then, and only then, does the code continue, and we can finally use the cool stuff from the module we just loaded. Okay, for our last section, let's tie all of this together. We'll take a quick look at where this stuff came from, and then walk through a simple, practical example so you can see how all the pieces fit together in a real project. It's funny. ES modules feel like they've been around forever, but they're actually kind of new. Before they became the standard, the big player on the block, especially for Node.js, was a system called CommonJS. You'll know it when you see it. It uses the require function instead of import. You're still going to run into this in a lot of older projects, so it's just good to be able to recognize it. All right, let's put this into practice with a tiny little project. Picture this file structure. You've got your main file, index.js, then you have user.js, and its whole purpose in life is to export a user class. And finally, you've got utils.js, which holds a handy greet function. So our index.js file is going to be the conductor of this little orchestra. First, it reaches over to user.js and pulls in the user class with a default import. Then it grabs the greet function from utils.js using a named import. And finally, it uses both of those imported pieces to create a new user and say hello. It's a perfect little demonstration of the whole system working together. Okay, time for a super fast recap. Think of this as your cheat sheet. Export, that's for sharing your code. Import, that's for grabbing it. A default export is for the one main thing a file does. Dynamic import is your performance booster for loading code later. And CommonJS, that's the old school way with require. So there you have it. We've seen how modules can take total chaos and turn it into clean, organized code, how they can boost performance and just make your life as a developer so much easier. So the only real question left is, how are you going to use modules to build your next awesome application?